So Chris, great to talk to you. Just before we get into the topic of our podcast today, can you just give us a little bit of background about yourself and your role at Aquila?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been involved with the business now for about 2.5 years, and my role within the organisation is to develop the business in the mid to enterprise space within the accounting sector, and very much enjoying my time here so far. I think we've got quite a unique product that enables us to support those businesses at a critical time of their business growth, where they're coming out of having had entry-level systems and really needing to modernize their finance team and support their ambitious growth plans going into the future, and Aquila's perfectly positioned to do so. So have some really interesting conversations with a lot of finance professionals since I've joined the business, and hope for many more in the years to come.
Okay, so you're talking to finance professionals in enterprise size organizations. What is it that's triggering the conversation with you at Aquila? Give a bit of background about what it is about Aquila that appeals to those types of people.
Yeah, well, I think fundamentally there is a acceptance amongst the finance industry that the trends are such that there is more demand on a finance leader to support the board more with more analytics, more data, and ultimately the only way that those individuals can free up time to provide more analysis and more insight to the board is to free up more time somewhere, or if they're lucky, to bring in more staff. But typically, without spending more money, they've got to try and automate tasks. And finance has traditionally been a very transactional department. There's a lot of data entry within their teams. And so ultimately, a lot of businesses now are getting to the stage where they're looking to find tools to better automate a lot of those manual, laborious tasks within their department, so that they can actually focus on the analytical side of their roles. And comes with that often not just bringing in some third-party software to support those automations, but fundamentally their foundations, being their finance system or their ERP system, could be 10, 15, 20 years old and isn't modern enough to embrace those new technologies. And so that results in them taking a look at the wider picture and ultimately thinking, well, if we're going to make these changes, maybe we need to start the ground up rather than trying to put some plasters on the problem. And so, again, Aquila perfectly positioned to come in there, being a modern piece of software that is behind its whole ethos is about trying to help businesses to modernize their finance function, to automate processes, and to find a way to free up time to better analyze the data that the system should be able to produce.
So a decision for any one of those reasons has been made to modernize the environment. Who within the organization do you first talk to? So somebody in those enterprise organizations is tasked with finding a solution to the challenges of faster reporting, improved integration. Typically, who are the people that you are talking to first?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question. I mean, ultimately, it depends on the makeup of the organization. For some instances, it can be the finance lead, whether that be the CEO, CFO, or the finance director or head of finance, whatever their title might be. In other organizations, that's a task that's been passed on to one of the team leaders within the team to go out and do the groundwork and do the due diligence around the industry, and then bring people in later on into the project. For other organizations, they may have a procurement team that's starting that process, or an IT department that's starting that process. So it can be different people depending on the organization and the challenges they face and where that project has been sat. But more often than not, there is a senior finance individual involved in that process, and rightly so, because they're the ones that will need to use that tool, and they're the ones with the challenges, and they're needing to find something that will address those. And so logically, they need to be involved in the decision making.
And now we start to get towards one of the key reasons you and I are having this conversation today. Proportionally speaking, how many of those finance professionals, or the people that are tasked with sourcing a solution to this enterprise issue, how many of them have cloud delivery at the top of their agenda?
Well, I think in the first instance, cloud could be perceived to be a bit of a buzzword. It has been bandied around, not just this industry, but all industries for some time now. Certainly when Aquila was first founded, cloud wasn't a turn of phrase, it was online. And cloud is a term that has since been coined. But I think that what comes with that is a high level of misunderstanding as to the true meaning of what cloud software is. Indeed, I think that there is an industry-wide acknowledgement that, given the circumstance that we live in today and the increasing demand for a flexible hybrid working environment, that what is crucial is that you can access all of your important tools, one of those key ones being your finance software, remotely, because the likelihood is there's going to be a large portion of your team that will be working from a home or away from the office on a regular basis. And so certainly we've seen in the last couple of years a big shift of people who have been on more traditional software, looking to upgrade, looking to migrate to a cloud solution. But I think that certainly within the accounting software market, there is a big misguidance, should we say, of how some of the older, more traditional software position themselves to deliver that requirement. Ultimately, they dress it up as being available in the cloud, which isn't the same as built for the cloud. Ultimately, what they're saying is it's still the old traditional architecture under the surface that is essentially on-premise. You can just access it via a browser now because we've made an upgrade, otherwise known as we've hacked the system to work in the new modern environment, but we're not evolving, we're not modernizing the foundations of our system. Whereas a true cloud solution is built for that environment, built for the future. And of course, given that a lot of the really big brands do not have true cloud solutions, but rather have these available in the cloud solutions, that's the noise that goes around the market, and it's misleading, and therefore it's understandable why a lot of finance professionals don't understand the difference between the two. Ultimately, what I would say to that is, because we often have the conversation, well, does having a true cloud solution really matter? As long as I can access it remotely? And sure, that's a fair comment short term, but ultimately, if you're trying to make something work in an environment that it's not built for, then it's going to eventually fall over. It's going to find it harder and harder to adopt modern innovations, and eventually it will creak at the seams and fall over. And so if you truly do want to modernize your environment, your working world, then you need to leverage modern tools that are built for the modern world rather than old tools that have been made to work in the modern world. And so, I guess that's why we talk here today, to try and draw people's attention to the fact that there is a lot of misunderstanding as to whether or not somebody's solution is built for the cloud or just available in the cloud. Essentially, there's a big difference.
So what, aside from the potential long-term impact, and I hear what you're saying, if you're going to acquire and go through the pain of transition, change is good, but it can sometimes also be painful. And when you are certainly in finance departments, the regulations, the complexity of requirements, if you're going to make a change to your underlying technology that is driving your reporting, you may as well make a change that will be sustainable and that will stay with you for the next 10 or 20 or 30 or more years. So your point about that longevity is I absolutely appreciate and understand that. And you mentioned that the technology being able to support future changes, but equally, when you think about cloud native technologies, solutions like Aquila, there are other elements, aren't there, that can be impacted by cloud native versus available in the cloud. And I'm thinking, for example, of software updates that get made or pricing restrictions as well. Can you touch on those two areas as another example of differences between cloud native or cloud-based and available in the cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. Just before we get into that, just to address your first point, in that, when somebody is coming to us, it's traditionally because they are ready to make a change to the foundations of their system. We fully appreciate that there are many people out there that don't have the budget, time, resource right now to make a change to the foundations. And so by able to upgrade with their existing solution to make it available remotely is a great first step. Where we would challenge people, and I suppose what we're coming from today is, if you're going to take the leap to replace your full system, don't replace it with another on-premise system that's available in the cloud. That's just replacing one bad solution with another, and that's why we want to create, I suppose, prompt this education piece, is that if you're going to go down that route that as you say, I don't think that changing finance solutions now is quite as painful as it was 20 years ago. And many people's experience of when they first went through it back in the late 90s, early noughties, they may not have been a project lead, but indeed they were certainly in a business where they could see the pain of it happening. That doesn't happen anymore, or shouldn't happen anymore with modern software. These big ERP implementations that take 2 years to complete and still aren't quite right should be a thing of the past. But yeah, as I say, what we're talking about is when you're really making those changes to those foundations, make sure that they are going to be sustainable long term, as you mentioned. But then coming to your second point, as you say, not just the importance of what we believe the value of cloud being as the modern way of developing software and the modern way of purchasing software, and its ability to be flexible and adaptable to embrace any new innovations that come in the future. Let's be honest, if you're going to bring in a new finance system, there's a good chance you're going to have it for the next 5 to 10 years. We don't know what innovations are going to be vitally important to our organizations in 5 to 10 years' time. If we think back 10 years ago, we probably didn't all have iPhones. And where would we be without them now? So, yes, we can we can envisage what might happen, we can look at trends, but we don't know what's going to come to market. But what we can do right now to protect ourselves there is purchase software that's going to be flexible and adaptable to pivot and adopt those new innovations when they do come. So you don't need to change your foundations when those things come. You can bring them into your software ecosystem and leverage those benefits for the better of your business. You mentioned about things such as maintenance and upgrades, and that, you know, it's a huge piece. I think the volume of people that I speak to that say that they're on an old version of their software, no wonder it can't support your current finance team. Not only is it old traditional software, but it also hasn't been updated in 2, 3, 5 years' time, because maybe your team either A, didn't have the budget to upgrade it, or B, didn't feel that any of the updates that were brought to market were relevant to your department. But what you maybe oversaw was all of the maintenance and things that were going on in the background that have meant that your system would be quicker, would keep up with changes that are going on within the industry and your organization. And so having a system like modern cloud software that upgrades itself every however frequently, with a killer 6 to 12 weeks, some other software, you know, once a quarter, you know, regardless, ultimately you want to make sure that what you're purchasing is always being updated, always being maintained, and that you're leveraging all those benefits without having to pay a maintenance contract or pay extra to your provider to get the benefit of that. It should be a given that you are using the most relevant, most up-to-date version of the software that you've bought. You know, we think about if you've got a Hotmail account or a Gmail account, you know, you've never paid extra to get the next upgrade. It's just evolved over time, as is your Facebook account, as of all of these things that you use in your day-to-day life. Expect that also in your business life. Don't just settle because that's how it's always been. You know, hey, finance software has also innovated in recent years, and there is some out there, if you can go and look at it, that can give you the same user experience as you expect in your personal life, not the frustrating old archaic software that you feel like this is as good as it gets. The volume of times that I speak to people who are making a change to their finance system, and their list of requirements are ultimately a list of things that haven't worked for the last 5 years. They're not ambitious or future thinking needs. I need to fix all these problems I've had for 5 years. Now, these have been things with modern software that wouldn't have been a problem for 5 years. And we always try to encourage people, yeah, but what would utopia be? If all of these things had been fixed, what would be the next thing? Because did you know all of these additional innovations are available to your business? We acknowledge you might not be able to adopt them all today, because time and to actually implement these things sometimes requires process change, sometimes requires bringing new people into your business who have the knowledge base to be able to utilize these tools. But at least know that your software can take you on that journey and can continuously improve rather than fix everything today. Because, hey, if you fix everything today and you don't have a system that can evolve into the future, tomorrow you're going to have problems again that are just going to be compounded every day you go on. You know, go on a continuous journey of improvement and your own journey at your own speed. Not trying to fix everything on day one, but knowing that you're going on a journey to continually improve your department, continually automate, continue looking at areas that you can improve, and then you're on a good course, I would argue.
That's fantastic. I think the analogy with the, you know, you wouldn't expect your Facebook to not be available or up to date or available on your phone. I think that's a really, really good way to position the cloud, the true cloud technologies or software that exists out there. So thank you very much for your time, Chris. That was very, very informative and useful, I think. Just as the last takeaway for anyone that's listening, what would the top 3 benefits or differences between cloud or cloud hosted applications be when you think about, for finance specifically, what are the top 3 major considerations or differences?
Yeah, I think we covered a couple of those off today already, in the sense that, fundamentally the ability to have a system that is going to grow and innovate with you at and at a speed that's realistic, I think is crucial. Modern technology can logically adapt to modern innovations quicker than old technology. I think the other piece of it, essentially, it will end up being cheaper for you. I acknowledge that everybody has different budgets to bring in a replacement finance system, but at the same time, you need something that's affordable. And again, modern software will be cheaper to implement. It will be quicker to implement. It'll be cheaper to maintain going into the future, and will also be cheaper to adopt new technologies. And ultimately, the third one that comes to mind is that as we evolve into the future, our finance teams will change in terms of the personnel. They'll change in terms of size, in terms of job function. And so you need a system that's going to be able to flex and change with that. You'll likely have some growth aspirations that are going to move into new geographical territories, going to need new skill sets in order to be able to make that happen. And so having a system, for example, Aquila is a true SaaS pricing product, whereby you from month to month can scale based on those users that are using the system, rather than on day one saying I need 20 users, and you pay for those 20 users whether you've got 20 users or not. And yes, I'm sure you could get more users, but you wouldn't be able to scale back. We've just gone through 2 years of time where a lot of finance departments have had to scale back, but they've still had to pay for those users that aren't even in an office and they're on furlough. If they were on a SaaS model product, they could have scaled that back, saved that cost until those individuals came back into the business and then grown again. So, we live in a future that we hope will go back to some form of normality, but at the same time, it is still an uncertain future. We don't know how the industry is going to continue to evolve. Make sure that you have a system that will be flexible to support that unknown future and support you on that journey.
Absolutely brilliant. Really appreciate that. I think that's some really very, very sage final words from you. So, Chris, all that remains is to thank you once again for your time, and let's hope we do another podcast together again soon.
My pleasure, anytime.